Picture this. The royal court of ancient China, a teenage king barely on his throne, and whispers swirling about his own mother, the Empress Dowager, and a man who was supposed to be a eunuch.
It really is the stuff of legend.
Exactly. And today, we're plunging headfirst into this incredibly dramatic power struggle.
We're going deep into the early reign of Ying Zheng, the future Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor. But we're really focusing our lens on this captivating and, often scandalous story of his mother, the Empress Dowager.
And her connection to Lu Buwei, that powerful figure.
And this other really enigmatic man, Lao Ai.
So to guide us through this wild period, we've been digging into the key historical texts, mainly Sima Qian's records of the Grand Historian.
That's the big one, yes. And also Sima Guang's comprehensive mirror for aid in government.
Yeah.
To give this fascinating, sometimes almost unbelievable look inside the Qin court.
And we're here to kind of unpack what it all means, right?
Right. Our goal for this deep dive isn't just telling the story. It's about trying to understand the complex web of power, ambition, personal relationships, everything that defined this era.
We want to get at the significance, maybe separate stereotype from reality if we can. Look at the motivations.
Exactly. Understand what drove these key players at such a pivotal moment in Chinese history.
Okay, let's unpack it then. Ying Zheng becomes king. He's what, 13? Very young.
Super young.
Which naturally leaves a bit of a power vacuum.
And during this time, his mother, the Empress Dowager, she gets involved with Marquis Weixin. That's Lu Buwei, right? A major player.
Oh, absolutely. A very high-status figure. And this relationship, it seems like it wasn't exactly a secret within the court.
Common knowledge, maybe?
Seems that way. But as Ying Zheng started growing up, getting older, starting to assert himself...
Lu Buwei must have seen the writing on the wall. You'd think so. He was a sharp political operator. Continuing an affair with the king's mother as the king matures, that's dangerous. Discovery could have been catastrophic for him, his position, maybe even his life.
So he needed an out. And his solution was, well, it's pretty creative. He introduces another man, this Lao Ai character.
He does, as a replacement for himself in the Empress Dowager's affections.
Okay, now here's where it gets really, really interesting. Why Lao Ai specifically? What was so special about him?
Well, this brings us to a truly memorable detail from the records of the Grand Historian.
Oh.
Sima Qian's text explicitly says Lu Buwei picked Lao Ai because of his large penis.
Yeah, really? The historical record actually says that?
It does, quite plainly.
Yeah.
And it even describes these like orchestrated public displays.
Displays.
Where Lao Ai would apparently parade around with his penis attached to a tongue tree wheel.
Attached to a wheel? You're kidding.
Not kidding. That's what the text claims. It sounds bizarre to us, obviously, but the implication is that this was a deliberate tactic by Lu Buwei.
To get the Empress Dowager's attention. With a wheel demonstration.
That seems to be the idea presented in the source, yes. Spread the word about Lao Ai's attributes, pique her interest.
Wow, okay. That's quite an image, and apparently it worked.
According to Sima Qian, yes. Lu Buwei then presented Lao Ai to her and basically bowed out of the affair himself.
Right, but we have to pause here. Like, how literally do we take that? A man chosen purely for that reason. It feeds into some pretty old stereotypes about women, doesn't it?
That's a really crucial point to raise. We have to consider the source, these ancient texts, written almost entirely by men.
Whose understanding of female psychology might have been, shall we say, limited or biased.
Exactly. Shaped by the social norms and stereotypes of their time. The idea that a powerful woman's main driver would be purely physical like that. It could easily reflect their biases more than the Empress Dowager's actual reality.
It makes you think, what if someone else had written it? The script even mentioned, like a hypothetical from a female writer like Zhang Ailing.
Imagine that perspective. Maybe focusing more on the emotional complexities. Perhaps there was a deep bond with Lu Buwei initially.
And maybe her interest in Lao Ai was about something else entirely. Or a mix of things, not just the wheel thing.
Precisely. It could have been loneliness, a desire for change, maybe reacting to Lu Buwei's political maneuvering. We just don't get that depth from the sources we have. It highlights the limitations, especially when understanding women's experiences back then.
Yeah, it really does underscore what we don't know. So, okay, putting aside the sort of questionable why for a moment, how did Lao Ai actually get into the palace, into the inner court? There were rules, right? Eunuchs only.
Exactly. Access to the Empress Dowager, especially intimately, required being a eunuch. And Lao Ai, well, even his name suggests he wasn't ideal. Lao Ai basically means that Lao guy with bad conduct.
So not someone you just wave into the inner sanctum.
Definitely not. So Lu Buwei and the Empress Dowager, they cooked up a plan. They had to make him look like a eunuch.
A fake castration. How did that even work?
Right.
Weren't eunuchs usually like war prisoners or criminals or voluntary?
Correct. Those are the main sources. And Laoi didn't fit. There was even a way for nobles to pay to avoid being made a eunuch if sentenced, which shows the stigma.
So deception was the only way.
It seems so. The records of the Grand Historian is quite clear. The plan was to pretend to be castrated, and then he could serve in the inner court.
How did they pretend?
Apparently, they just plucked his eyebrows and beard.
That's it. That was enough.
Seems minimal, doesn't it? But maybe the definition or the enforcement was different then, or maybe bribes were involved. The text just says he feigned it.
And this serving in the inner court thing, that wasn't just like bringing tea, right? It became a position.
Yes, it evolved into an actual title. It meant you were close to the royals, maybe advisory roles, influence.
So Laoi gets in under false pretenses, plucked eyebrows and all.
And the Empress Dowager was apparently very satisfied with this new arrangement. So much so, she stopped her contact with Lu Buwei.
And we should remember she was probably still relatively young at this point, right? Maybe under 40.
Likely, yes. So, a sexual relationship itself isn't the unbelievable part, despite all the political drama around it.
Okay, so he's in, but then the story shifts, doesn't it? From personal affairs to, well, power politics.
Oh, definitely. The Empress Dowager clearly favored Laoi immensely, and crucially, they had 2 sons together, secretly.
2 sons. That changes everything. That raises the stakes incredibly high.
Absolutely. And Laoi's status skyrockets. He's granted the title Marquis Chengxin.
A marquis? That's serious nobility. And a fiefdom, too.
A big one. Taiwan. So suddenly, he's not just the Empress Dowager's favorite. He's a major political force. He gets involved in government business. People start flocking to him, becoming his retainers.
Using his own power base.
To the point where it started to rival Lu Buwei's own network. It's a classic case of power derived from personal favor, which can be really unstable in these systems.
And the Empress Dowager, she moves them away from the main capital.
Yes, she relocates with Laoi to Yangcheng, which is the old capital. The official reason was something about auspicious omens or divination.
But the real reason was
to raise their 2 sons in greater secrecy, away from the prying eyes of the main court in Xinyang.
It's interesting you compare her to Empress Dowager Xuan from earlier Qin history. Xuan seemed much more open about her relationships and power.
It's a different context. Qin was becoming much more centralized under Ying Zheng. Plus, his mother didn't have the same kind of powerful family connections within the Qin state that Xuan did. Her power was mostly just derived from being the king's mother, more precarious.
So it looks like she might have been focused on the secret family life, but Laoi, his ambition kept growing.
It certainly seems that way. The power he gained just wasn't enough. He kept gathering retainers, building his faction. It looked like a direct challenge waiting to happen.
And then it all comes crashing down. Someone talks.
Exactly. An informant, apparently someone with a grudge against Laoi, goes straight to Ying Zheng.
And spills everything.
The whole story. Laoi is not really a eunuch. The affair with his mother, the 2 secret sons, and the most dangerous part, the alleged plot that Laoi planned for one of his sons to inherit the throne after Ying Zheng died.
Whoa, okay. For a young king still finding his feet, that is absolutely earth-shattering news, as the text says.
You'd think maybe they'd try to handle such a huge family scandal discreetly, behind closed doors.
But that's not what happened at all, was it?
Not even close. Things escalated very quickly and very publicly.
Laoi must have realized the jig was up. He panicked.
Seems like it. He feared exposure, the consequences. So he made an incredibly desperate, incredibly bold move.
What did he do?
He forged the king's imperial seal. And the Queen Mother's seal, too, apparently.
Forging the imperial seal, that's not just covering tracks. That's treason. That's open rebellion.
Precisely. A direct challenge to Ying Zheng's authority. He used the forged seals to mobilize troops, county soldiers, palace guards, even Rongdaever's mercenaries.
To do what? Attack the king.
To attack Qinian Palace in Yangcheng. This was a really important ceremonial place, maybe where Ying Zheng was conducting rites related to his coming of age or coronation. Laoi perhaps saw a chance to strike, while the king was occupied there.
A coup attempt, basically. But Ying Zheng wasn't caught off guard.
No, he responded incredibly fast. He ordered his prime minister, Shang Pingjun, and another key figure, Chang Wen-jun, possibly relatives, to lead forces against Laoi immediately.
So, a direct military confrontation.
Yes, there was a battle right in Shanyang, the capital. Sources say hundreds were beheaded in the fighting. Lao Ai's forces were defeated.
And Lao Ai himself.
He fled, but he was hunted down. Some accounts say captured, others say he was beheaded while trying to escape. There's even a bounty mentioned 1 million coins for capturing him alive, 500,000 for his head.
And you have to wonder, Lu Buwei is still around, right? Still powerful, even if not the regent anymore.
He is. And it's definitely plausible he might have had an interest in making sure Lao Ai was silenced permanently, to prevent any embarrassing details about their earlier arrangement coming out.
Yeah, tying up loose ends. The aftermath sounds absolutely brutal.
It was savage. This wasn't just about punishing Lao Ai. It was about eradicating his entire influence and sending a terrifying message.
How severe are we talking?
Extermination of his 3 clans. That's his father's side, his mother's side, and his wife's side. Wiped out.
Horrific. And his followers?
His key followers faced execution by being torn apart by chariots, a particularly gruesome punishment. And their families were exterminated too.
And even people less involved.
Even retainers considered to have minor involvement were rounded up. Over 4,000 families, the records say, were stripped of their titles and exiled to the remote region of Shu. A massive purge.
And what about the Empress Dowager, the king's own mother?
She didn't escape his wrath. She was effectively exiled, confined to the Beiyang Palace back in Yangqing.
And her sons with Lao Ai.
They were found and killed. Ying Zheng showed no mercy there.
He then issues a decree, right, forbidding anyone from pleading her case.
An incredibly strict order. Anyone who dared remonstrate about the Empress Dowager situation faced execution, and their bodies would be mutilated as a warning.
That's extreme. Yet people still did it? The sources mention 27 people being killed for speaking out.
Yes, executed, and their bodies displayed under the city gate as a grim deterrent. It shows the level of fear, but also maybe the level of unease among some officials.
And despite that, we get the story of Mao Zhao.
Remarkable, isn't it? A man from the state of Qi. He sees the bodies, knows the penalty, and still insists on remonstrating, famously saying he'd come to make up the number of the 28 constellations.
Just incredibly bold or suicidal. What was Ying Zheng's reaction?
Absolute fury. The king reportedly said he hadn't seen such defiance and ordered Mao Zhao to be cooked alive in a cauldron. Threatened him with it anyway.
Wow. It really makes you wonder, though. Why? Why would 27, 28 people risk that kind of death just to argue about the Empress Dowager's exile? Was it purely sympathy? Or politics?
That's a great question. It could be a mix. Some might have genuinely felt the king was going too far, violating filial piety, potentially destabilizing things. Others might have seen a political angle, positioning themselves as defenders of tradition, even against a furious king.
Or maybe, just maybe, the accounts of the punishments are slightly exaggerated for dramatic effect.
That's always a possibility with historical chronicles like these. Sima Qian wanted to convey the ruthlessness and the terror of the situation. But the core events, the rebellion, the purge, the exile, seem solid.
So just to wrap our heads around this whole period, we've got a young king coming into his own amidst this whirlwind of court intrigue.
Absolutely. Scandals involving his own mother, her powerful former lover Lu Buwei, this unlikely figure Lao Ai rising meteorically.
Only to crash and burn in a bloody rebellion and an even bloodier purge.
It's a story packed with ambition, betrayal, sex, power. And ultimately, it marks a crucial moment in Ying Zheng's consolidation of absolute authority. These relationships, as wild as they seem, had huge consequences for Qin's path forward.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with a final thought, maybe. When you look at all this, the different accounts, the potential biases we talked about, the sheer human drama, what does this ancient story really tell us? About the nature of power, maybe. About gender dynamics back then. About how history itself gets written and remembered.
And what parts of it still kind of echo today. You know, the ambition, the risks people take, the way narratives are shaped. It's fascinating stuff.
Definitely something to think about. Consider the motivations that Empress Dowager, Lu Buwei, Lao Ai, Ying Zheng himself, and think about the long shadow these events cast over the Qin dynasty right as it was gearing up to unify China. And if you're still interested in the glorious Tang dynasty, you can take a look at my 4-hour video about the Tang dynasty.
We genuinely love to hear your thoughts on this. Jump into the comments section and let us know what resonated. Which type of wealth are you focusing on?
Yeah, let us know.
And hey, if you found this discussion useful, maybe learned something new, definitely hit that subscribe button. We do these deep dives regularly, exploring valuable ideas.
We appreciate you tuning in.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.